Hello, sixth graders, and welcome back from your Easter break. I hope you guys had a good time and were able to relax and spend some time with family, which I guess you've been doing a lot of recently. And also welcome to week 4 of e-learning. It doesn't feel like it's been 4 weeks, for sure. Maybe it feels different to you guys, I'm not sure, but it feels like this has been going pretty fast. Okay, so today we're talking about the forms of nonfiction, which are autobiographies, essays, and persuasive speeches. Let's get into it. Before we begin that, though, I'd actually like to do a quick review of what we've been talking about in regards to nonfiction. And of course, remember, nonfiction is writing about true events or true information. We talked about the purposes of nonfiction. The 3 main purposes that authors always write with are to inform, to describe, or to persuade. Okay. We also talked about the types of nonfiction. So the authors have their purpose. They want to inform someone about their life, maybe. So they're going to either write that with informative nonfiction, which is where they just list facts and information. They're going to write it with narrative nonfiction, where they tell a story. Or literary nonfiction, where they tell a very intricate, very expressive story with lots of figurative language. So these are 3 sort of ways or styles that the authors use to get their information to their audience. Okay, today we're going to focus on the forms of nonfiction. Now I know form is sort of another word for type, but this is a different thing altogether. We'll talk about how it fits into the purposes and the types in a little bit, but first let's go over what the different forms are. Form of a piece of nonfiction is like the physical form of the printed out nonfiction. Or maybe another way to say it would be, it's the final product. I know that's maybe a little confusing right now, but let's talk a little bit more about what that means. So you've got autobiographies, you've got essays, and you've got speeches. Generally, when you start out with your purpose and you've got your type of nonfiction you're going to write, it's going to end up as one of these 3 things: an autobiography, an essay, or a speech. Let's define those 3 things right now. So autobiography has auto as a prefix and biography as its root word. Auto means that it has to do with yourself, the self. Biography is a piece of nonfiction about somebody's life. So an autobiography is a piece of nonfiction about the author's own life. They write it themselves, they say, hey, my life story is very important, everyone should know about it, I'm gonna write about it. And they do. There are 3 different sort of types or styles of autobiography, though. We have memoir. I know it looks like memoir, but it's pronounced memoir, which describes a few big events in somebody's life. An example of that would be The Story of My Life by Helen Keller. She talks about the main, big, important things that happened in her life that made it so extraordinary. Okay, we've also got a diary. We're probably all familiar with what this is. It's just a personal record of events, not necessarily all of the super important ones, but it is of just sort of the day-to-day life that you experience. The Diary of Anne Frank is a very famous diary that people tend to read at least once in their life. Or something that you'd read at high school, but it's the story of somebody, Anne Frank, who was a Jewish girl that lived in Nazi Germany, and it's about how she had to survive during that terrible time. Okay, then there's an autobiographical sketch. So let's look at this word real quick. Autobiographical is very big, but we can break it down. We've got autobiography in there, so we know it has to do with that. And if you've got this I-C-A-L at the end, ical, then that just means that that this is sort of an adjective that has to do with its root word. So an adjective describes a noun. So this word, autobiographical, describes this sketch. And so we can tell that this word is saying that the sketch has to do with an autobiography. Now, a sketch is, in art, like an artistic sketch would be just a quick drawing, like this quick little drawing of a heart I can make if I move my cursor really fast. Sort of. So an autobiographical sketch, that would be where you quickly describe the high points in your life in a piece of writing. So once again, autobiographical just means it has to do with an autobiography. Oh yes, so maybe you read one chapter of the Autobiography of Ben Franklin. That would be an autobiographical sketch. Okay. The second type is essays. An essay is just a short work about one single subject. Now, as you're writing a 5-paragraph essay, it might not feel like a short work, but compared to a whole book about a piece of information, an essay is pretty short. And you guys have lots of experience writing these in Mrs. Booth's class. So there's a few different ways, or a few different styles of essay. You've got persuasive essays, which convince the readers of something. A good example of that would be this essay called Liberty or Death by Patrick. Written right before the Revolutionary War started, and that phrase, give me liberty or give me death, that comes from this essay. It's really short, and it's a sort of a letter to Congress convincing them they should go to war against Great Britain because they're being treated unfairly. We've got narrative essays. A narrative essay tells us a story. Remember, narrative and narrator both share the same root word, as does the word narrate, and they all have to do with storytelling. So if you were to write an essay about a famous event in history, really any famous event in history, or not famous, you'd be telling a story, and it'd be true, so it would count. Then we've got expository. Kind of a scary sounding big word, but if we look at the root word, expose, or expose, that is shared in the word expose, and expose means to reveal something. In expository writing, you are revealing or giving facts and information. So I like to think I'm exposing the truth about jellyfish or whatever my topic. If you've had a chance to write a research paper, then that was expository. Okay, and lastly, we've got reflective. A reflective essay is when you give the author's or your own beliefs on a topic or a piece of information. So, if you've ever read a devotion, that's just the author giving their own thoughts on a piece of scripture or a Bible story, or maybe a struggle that a lot of Christians go through. Okay, let's talk now about speeches. A speech is simply a spoken presentation of the speaker's ideas or beliefs. And a speech can be written down. A lot of times we think of speeches as just someone standing up, and that's definitely what a speech is, but keep in mind that a speech can also be written down. Persuasive speech. Much like a persuasive essay, it's made to convince the listeners of something. A wonderful example of that would be the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King Jr., where he was trying to persuade people about the importance of giving everybody equal rights in the United States. Okay, then we've got an address. I know it looks like the word address because it's spelled the exact same way, but when we're talking about speeches and we use this word, we pronounce it. Address is a formal speech to a certain people group. A good example of that is the Gettysburg Address, which was spoken by Abraham Lincoln and was spoken to the people of the United States about. Then we've got a talk. So if you were asked to stand up and tell the whole class about your favorite TV show, that would be a talk, because a talk is an informal or a casual presentation of the speaker's knowledge on a subject. Now, one example of talk, maybe a more official version than just standing up in front of your friends and... I don't know if you guys have watched any of these in any of your classes, but TED Talks are basically a big collection of people getting up, talking about something they're knowledgeable about, or sometimes trying to persuade you about. Okay. So, we've talked about the three forms. We've got essays, and we have speeches, which we just discussed. But now that we know all the forms, how do we keep the purposes and the types and the forms all straight? Well, one way that I like to remember it is like this. The purpose is what inspires the writing. The type is sort of the way you get there, and the form is the final destination. The form is the end product. So let's look at an analogy. Let's imagine you're building a house, and we'll use these 3 words to talk about that process. You've got a purpose, a type, and a form. So you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose for what you're building? The type, what is the type of material you want to use? Is it bricks? Is it metal? Is it stone? Then you've got to think about the form. What's the final product? What's the shape of the house? So the purpose of, for an example, the purpose for making a building could be making a building to vacation in. The type of material you want to use could be wood. And then the form would be a hey, there's lots of different forms or shapes a house could be. It could be a mansion, it could be just a normal house, it could be a shack. But in this case, to fit our purpose and our type, we are going to make it a beach house. All right, let's look more at what this looks like in regards to real nonfiction writing. Oh, and here's a picture of the beach house. So, imagine you're writing some nonfiction. You've got your purpose, your type, and your form. Remember, the purpose sparks the idea, gets things in motion. The type is the way that you travel with that information to the final product, the form. So what's the purpose for your writing? Do you want to persuade somebody? Do you want to inform someone of something? Do you want to tell about a story from your life? You got to figure that out to begin. What is the type of writing? Is it going to be informative nonfiction? Is it going to be narrative nonfiction? Is it going to be literary nonfiction? And then, what is the shape of the writing? Which is sort of a weird way to say, what's the final product of the writing going to look like? Autobiography, essay, speech, which one? Let's make an example. Let's say that I would like to tell my life story. That is my purpose. So this would be to inform or describe and to persuade anybody of anything. So my purpose, to inform, to tell my life story. What's the type? Well, I feel like narrative would probably be a good one for this. I'm wanting to tell a story, the story of my life, and narrative is all about. Then the form I would use would be an autobiography, probably more specifically a memoir. So my goal, the purpose and the spark is to tell my life story. The way I get there is by putting all of this into narrative writing, and my final destination is a finished autobiography, which might look something like this. Mr. Simick's whole darn life in a book. This is the form, the final product of all of my work. All right, that was a lot of information. We are going to go over this a little bit more in the coming weeks. So if you feel like this was all just a huge power hose of information into your brain and you didn't soak it all up, that's okay. We're going to review it, go over it in the future. Tomorrow, I believe we'll begin doing a writing workshop though, so we'll try to work this into that as well. Thanks for joining me today, and have a good rest of your night. I'll talk to you tomorrow.